that way. Yes.
First chapter of Snow Crash. How long did you work to create that?
Not that long. I mean, it's not.
It would help if you repeated the question.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. The question was how long did it take me to write the first chapter of Snow Crash? There's a pretty widespread belief that things get better if you put more time into them, which I think is pretty debatable. So that came out pretty fast, and so to the extent that has any good qualities, it's not the result of many hours of work. It's something else. I encourage people who are writing not to necessarily buy into the idea that the way to move forward is to keep working on the same thing for many hours. I don't know if that's very helpful, but yes. Sorry.
Did the desire to write the Baroque trilogy come out of interest in economics or history?
Did the desire to write the Baroque cycle come out of an interest in economics or history? That was an anomaly. It came out of the. I had written Cryptonomicon, which sort of dealt with money and computers and codes, and as it was sitting there getting ready to be published, I became aware from two different sources that Leibniz had worked on computers much earlier than I had ever imagined anyone did that. So I got that from a book by George Dyson called Darwin Among the Machines. And I also, about the same time, just by dumb luck, a friend of mine happened to mention that Newton, during the last 3 decades of his life, had run the Royal Mint at the Tower of London. So here was a case where you've got the two greatest minds on the planet at that time. One of them is working with computers, the other is working with money. They're living in the middle of one of those most turbulent, fascinating periods in human history. They know each other, they hate each other, they're at war, and it just was obvious that I was going to have to do something with that. So that's how that happened. Yes.
Do you think of Enoch Root as your Lazarus Long?
This is terrible, but can you remind me who Lazarus Long is?
Time on the days of future past, time enough for love. His eternal character who doesn't suffer age and knows wisdom?
I guess not. Yes, or interested.
So you tend to dump a lot of information in your novels, which I love, but it seems like you don't revisit those subjects in your later novels, with Cryptonomicon and the Baroque cycle being obvious exception to that. Is that a conscious thing, or is it just you kind of move on in your own interests?
So the question is, I dump a lot of information into my books, and the questioner is very careful to point out that he doesn't think that's a bad thing. But I tend not to go back, with some exceptions, and retread the same stuff. My general philosophy about this is that if I've got a new idea, it's better to move on than to circle back around. There's a line in the Bible about the dog returns to his own vomit, which it's made pretty. It's clear from the context that this is not a good thing, and so that's what always pops into my head when I think of circling back around and trying to cover stuff that I've already gone over. Given a choice, I'll always try to do something new, and I know it causes some consternation from some readers who, because I hear from them, so well, I read novel A and then novel B was different. What gives? It does have some negative side effects, but I just feel like it's probably the best thing to do overall. Yeah, way in the back, way in the side. Yeah.
You comment on the singularity fiction, and what you said, that's something you consider writing on, or are you interested in singularity fiction as a prediction, or as just sort of an explanation about what we're seeing?
Singularity fiction as a prediction. Am I interested in it? I'm not, as these things go, it's not one of my favorite ideas. I guess if it's false, then it's false, and to hell with it. And if it's true, then I sort of don't care, because I'd rather just devote my time to doing interesting things rather than sitting around waiting for the singularity to happen. So for me, it's kind of neither here nor there. I think there is something to the second part of your question, where what about writing about it as like a reflection of our hopes and dreams? But I guess that's still an open door. Yeah.
Do you foresee the death of the school textbook and the birth of a way of using fiction to talk about things like metaphysics and all of that? Because for me personally, I didn't understand even the fundamentals of the common things like astrophysics and metaphysics until I read Anathema, and after that, that birthed a new interest into all of those things. Do you see? What do you see happening to textbooks that are
could fiction so it'd be a general replacement for textbooks in conveying certain material? There's kind of probably not enough people around to write that fiction, if you know what I mean. I mean, I do think that it can be an effective teaching tool, but it's to make that practical, we'd have to have some kind of like training program for fiction writers. We have to, like, you know what I'm saying? We'd have to create a much larger number of people who can do that, which actually is a pretty cool idea. Now that you mention it, but right now that doesn't exist. So I think it is an issue with textbooks that they appeal to it's like a self-delimited subset of the human race who learn well from textbooks. And I've known both kinds of people, right? I've known people who are great with textbooks, and I've known people who just completely glaze over. Yeah, so what we've got now is a way of serving one part of the market, but it doesn't work for everybody else. So I'm just checking out the blue tape on the floor. Yeah, so there's a force field set up here. So, interesting idea. To make it work, we have to get more people who could do it. So that would be the next step on that, I guess. Start a camp. Yeah. Somebody else needs to run that camp. Yes.
You just spoke about not treading the same ground that you visited, so that begs the question: where are you heading next? Can we get some spoilers?
No spoilers, but I've got an idea. Where am I heading next? What's my next book going to be? I've got an idea for what I want to write next. I'm starting to sort of pull together the materials that are going to be needed for it. It's going to be a while. I haven't really started yet, and until then, I'd prefer not to say much about it. Yeah, thanks. Yeah.
Are you going to attack the issue of what we're missing by avoiding high-living polymaths and trying to digitize everything that sentence skills and have
What are we avoiding by ditching the idea of the Heinleinian polymath and sort of specializing? I just think it's too heavy a burden to carry. I mean, Heinlein has this very famous quote about, you should be able to butcher a hog and con a ship and, do open heart surgery on yourself, chop down trees and so on. And it's just not a, I brought it up in one of these readings the other day, and people were jumping out of their seats saying, I've been hag-ridden by that thing my whole life, because I could never hope to learn how to do all those things, So there's a lot of people running around, a lot of guys running around feeling totally inadequate because of that. So I'm all in favor of people learning how to do practical things, but it's good to kind of set practical, attainable goals so that they don't get completely discouraged and bummed out. Yeah. Yes.
Yes, has Thomas Pynchon had any influence on you?
Yeah, I mean, influence questions are hard to answer. Has Pynchon had any influence on me? I mean, sure. I've read most of his stuff. It's incredibly impressive, and he's done some things that that any reasonable person would aspire to. So yeah, when you start trying to parse the word influence and exactly what it means, that's when it kind of breaks down a little bit. But certainly in terms of his ambition and his willing to just try crazy stuff and get away with it, he sets an example that I think is worth keeping an eye on. Yeah.
If you were drafted into being a benevolent dictator for the whole world, what sort of policies would you start enacting before you started to become unsure of yourself?
If I was drafted into becoming a benevolent dictator for the whole world, what was the second part again?
What policies would you start enacting before you started getting unsure of yourself?
So what would I feel comfortable with? At what point would I start to feel unsure of
Probably
myself?
like top 3 or 5 ideas there.
Well, first of all, I want to take a good long look at whatever system made it possible to draft me into the role of dictator. That would require some pretty careful examination. I'll just throw out one thing, which is I'm reading a book called The Dark Valley, which is about the 1930s. And this guy quotes Gibbon. He doesn't say where it's from, but presumably it's Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire, where he talks about people getting into a state where it's somewhere between just wishful thinking and active lying, and essentially losing their track on reality, so I think that's a pretty pithy statement. I got to go back to Gibbon and find it, but that's been on my mind a little bit. So I'd immediately start a commission to look in on that. Yeah.